The reason they like reading my stuff is that I've always got real life examples to prove what I'm saying.
There's a lot of good people that listen to this podcast.
Other than God and my family, deer hunting would be next in line on my list of priorities.
From the bottom of our hearts, it's just fantastic and awesome to have the support that you guys are getting.
People ask me about expandable broadheads and love swings.
Chasing Giants with Don Higgins and Terry Peer. Brought to you by Osseo Camo, nature's most lethal camouflage. Follow along as Don and Terry discuss the techniques, strategies, and dedication needed to harvest one of God's most amazing creations, world-class whitetails.
Welcome, everyone, to this week's Chasing Giants podcast brought to you by Osseo Gear. Don Higgins, I'm Terry Peer. This is episode 151 on January 8th. We're starting out a new year. We've both been on the consulting road and starting out. How's it been out there?
I've been home about an hour, but, a guy's not very smart when he goes up to northern Wisconsin in January and he takes the lightest pair of rubber boots he's got and no heavy socks. My feet were froze. But
that probably wasn't very good planning. I know the Minnesota, the Dakotas, and Wisconsin's been hit with some pretty warm weather, and down here in Kentucky, it's been really mild. I was out in a t-shirt today.
I wasn't in a t-shirt, but had Steve Shields along for 3 visits this week. We stopped right in northern Illinois, right on the Wisconsin border, the first day. Then we went up to north central Wisconsin the second day. And today we was by Dubuque, Iowa.
So you made a pretty big circle then.
Yeah, we did, and got home about an hour ago.
And for our new listeners that might not understand the reference there, Steve Shields is a longtime friend of both of ours, but does all of the video, not only field work, but also production work. Whenever we produce real world stuff, Chasing Giant stuff, or the Whitetail Master Academy, which is where he's spending most of his time right now, producing new content for the people that are involved in that project with you. He's a great guy, one of the best in the business.
Yeah, all 3 of these properties that we looked at are going to be featured on the Whitetail Master Academy. So the one, and they were all totally different. The one in northern Illinois was right on a river. Basically the river makes a big old loop and just about surrounds this property on 3 sides, but fairly sizable. I think it was about 250 acres. And then we went to that Wisconsin property, which was very unique. It was 240 acres, but a lot of that was marsh or swampland. And then back through Dubuque, Iowa, Dubuque's right on the Mississippi River, so we was in some pretty rough terrain in some of that bluff country right there close to the Mississippi River. And that property was right at 200 acres. So all 3 of those will be featured on the Whitetail Master Academy in upcoming months.
I want to tee up our episode today before we get too far along. As we're talking about some consulting examples that we've done this week, both Don and I, this episode is really going to be featured on tips for scouting late season. And I think it's just a great topic that I'm excited to hear about what you say, because it's far beyond just running trail cameras to decide what inventory is there, because, what we see with trail cameras is really just what's there, not how it's moving, where they're at, where they're bedding, where they're feeding. We're going to be talking on and off through the first part of this podcast tonight about tips that we're looking for a property that we're hunting, whether it's a new property, our own properties, public land, but also things that get us a little excited when we're walking around a consultant's property. The funny thing that happened to me this last weekend, I was up in Ohio with a new friend. I don't even consider these guys clients anymore. It's a new friend, and he was laughing because he could hear the pitch in my voice change when we walked up to certain areas of the farm, and it just looked dynamite. Or I thought we would have a really good idea to create something that would help him for his goals. And he said the pitch of my voice started changing, and I literally got more excited as we were walking. So we're going to be talking about that a little bit as we navigate this first segment. Real quick, before we move on, let's do a housekeeping thing, Don, and I'm going to share my screen because we've been getting so many messages about these live events you're going to be at.
Right, and I am going to give the phone numbers, Terry, because I know a lot of our Amish listeners do not see this on YouTube video, so the only way they would know the phone numbers is if I read them off. So the first event is January 27th and 28th. That's in Plymouth, Indiana, with the tag out group up there. This is basically a field day. We're going to tour a property up there that I've worked with these guys on for at least 3 or 4 years now, and so most of it's going to be outside on that tour. There's going to be a group each morning and a different group each afternoon. I think it's limited to 25 in each group, so 50 a day. And if they're not sold out, they're probably close to it. But the number you can call is 574-248-0322 for that one. Then February 2nd, Terry and I are both going to be in Middlefield, Ohio, where we're doing a live Chasing Giants podcast. That's going to be in the evening. There's going to be food. I know there may be a speaker besides us, or maybe we'll speak a little bit before the podcast. But 2 phone numbers you can call for that February 2nd Middlefield, Ohio event. The first one's 440-321-5336, or you can call 440-813-5455. Then the very next night, we're going to go south of there about an hour and a half to Millersburg, Ohio, and going to have a seminar at JB's Feed and Supply, which is a real world dealer there by Millersburg. If you need info on that event, 330-231-6461. And I believe there's going to be food at that event as well. But call that number for the details. Then going on a tour north and west in mid-February, the 15th, I'm going to be at Winona, Minnesota at Waitoka Tavern Banquet Hall. But the number for that is 507-458-1454, and that's for another real world dealer, Pfeiffer Hill Land Management. Then the very next evening, I'm going to be down doing a seminar at Heartland Outdoors in Falls City, Nebraska. There is a $40 fee for this one. It's going to include a meal. They're going to have a gun raffle and a few other things, but any info for that one, call 402-883-7547 in Falls City, Nebraska. And then on the 18th is the Whitetail Management Summit in Salina, Kansas. That's going to be where I'm speaking. Dr. Bronson Strickland is speaking, and Wes Delks is going to be speaking. And then there'll be, after each of us have spoke, there's going to be a question and answer session. There's going to be, it's $65 a person for this event, but that includes a barbecued lunch, catered barbecued lunch. And it also includes a discount coupon for real world wildlife products. And I think there's some other, I think they handle 360 hunting blinds and a few other brands that they're going to have specials on that day. That's on a Saturday. So for the Whitetail Management Summit in Salina, Kansas, the number is 785-893-2803.
All right. Thanks for everyone's patience as we got through that. It just takes a little bit, and we know that the people listening on the audio platforms can't see the screen that we're sharing, so appreciate your patience. The only thing I have cooking the rest of this month is I will be at the ATA show. I have 2 short meetings there, but we'll be hanging out in some of our friends' booths for a while on Thursday of next week. And then I will be out at the SHOT Show for several days. So if any of our listeners are going to be at either one of those two trade shows, send me a private message. We'll try to hook up and say hello to each other. That's the only thing I have going outside of consulting. Don, before we move on, why don't you give just a quick update about master classes while we're in a pause talking about hunting?
I just got home about an hour ago and went through my mail, and I processed some checks for deposits on those classes. So the March 18th event is full. It's been full for a while. March 16th, I think, has about maybe 3 or 4 openings left in that one. And then the 9th and the 11th, those two classes with Dr. Bronson Strickland, those have about 5 openings each. And just throwing this out there, I'm going to take a break from these classes next year. If you're wanting to come see the property, you probably ought to do it at one of these classes, because I've got some major projects taking place on my property, and it's probably going to take at least a year, maybe 2 years. When I do these, I'm planning on putting in a walking path for these classes in the future, and it'll look totally different when we resume these classes. Now, I will probably do a couple of remote classes each spring moving forward, but here on my home farm, there's going to be a break of at least a year, maybe 2 years, with no classes. So if you want to come, you better get your name in the hat. There's not that many openings left.
Yeah, and the other thing that I want to bring up about the master class for the people who have already registered and the people who might be on the fence about going, you take orders for real world product, and we have those pre-packaged for people. So our office staff is just phenomenal. I was talking to Janice a couple times this week, and she's got a new staff that's helping her every day, and Dwayne's over there a lot. But they go ahead, if you get your order to Dawn, they go ahead and build up skids with your order and shrink wrap it so it's weatherproof, so that you can save shipping. So if you're going to be buying several bags of product, the discount that you get as a master class attendee and the money you save via shipping is a big portion of what the master class price would be. And I'm not trying to oversell it. I'm just saying this is an added perk. So if you need something, I know one of our master class clients has been emailing you this week trying to place his order. If you've already put in your deposit, know that you can work with Don ahead of time to have all of that, because at the end of the master class, Don spends as much time as anybody wants to talk. He stays around and does all of that, and I usually go down and start loading people up with their orders, and sometimes your son-in-law Corey's there to help us, and that lets you just spend as much time as needed from the guests that are there. So pretty nice perk of the master class, and shipping's outrageous right now. I wish we could do something about it, but we can't. But another perk of our master class students.
Yeah. So anybody that's signed up for the class, you'll be getting an information sheet mailed to you here about the 1st of February. And that's going to give you a full month, to make motel reservations. I'll have motel information on that sheet, and also information on placing a real world order. So you won't have to go to the real world office. We'll have your order right here, same place where the class is at to pick up. So be looking for those info sheets if you've already signed up for a class.
There was one more other announcement I wanted to make real quick. We mentioned on last week's podcast the idea of having Onyx come onto the podcast to give some ideas and tips and tricks. We've got overwhelming response that you guys want to hear that. So we're going to be working with Onyx here in the next couple of weeks to schedule that. So we appreciate that feedback. I think it's just a great segment. Don, you and I both use it a lot when we're consulting. It's so much easier to keep track of where we're walking, where the paths are, making notes. And then, you can talk a little bit about the plans and everything, but I've been even using it when I do my plans with aerials that I send to you to approve before they go out. So I'm sure everybody else is kind of doing the same thing, but it's a great tool.
I use Onyx every single day. I'm pulling it up. Today, I bet I had it pulled up on my phone 20 times as we was walking the property, marking different things. I take my notes right there on Onyx, drop pins for stands, drop pins for food plots, and then for each pin you can take notes, and it's just fantastic. It shows you property lines, contour lines for the topo. It's just a fantastic app, and we'll get someone from Onyx on the podcast to explain some of the other features that I probably just overlook.
Yeah, we kind of get in a rhythm of what works for us for what our needs are, and there's so many other tools there. But thanks for the feedback on that. We're working on getting that schedule for you. So before we go on and start talking a little bit about tips for scouting this time of year, let's listen to a spot from our friends at Osseo Gear.
Osseo Gear introduces a premium line of bow hunting gear that is unmatched, pairing nature's finest camouflage with the best technological innovations. Osseo Gear brings whitetail bow hunters the gear they need to be the best at their craft. The unique camouflage mimics the intricate feather pattern of North America's greatest predatorial creatures. Designed for invisibility, built for comfort, and engineered for function. Visit OsseoGear.com. That's ASIO Gear.com to start shopping. Osseo Gear. Prepare to be invisible.
All right, well, welcome back. Thanks for everybody following our friends at Osseo. We're going to have Joe Miles on the podcast here in the next couple of weeks to talk about the new products that are coming out in 2023. He's got some new products he's excited to release, but I'll be honest with you, I'm excited about a couple of these new things he's going to be talking about. I just want to hear about his unbelievable hunting season. I don't know of anyone else that had the type of season that Joe Miles did this year.
Well, he's a flat out killer. And the thing of it is he's going, I think in South Carolina where he lives, the season opens in mid-August, like I think August 15th. And he's going at it from August 15th when the season opens in his home state. He's still going. And you don't know where he's going to show up next with a giant buck. It might be Mexico. It might be Canada. It might be Washington State out on the West Coast. It might be in the Midwest. It might be Texas. He just goes everywhere, and everywhere he goes, he ends up with a great buck.
So we're going to have him on the podcast here in a week or two. We had some scheduling conflicts as we're preparing for trade show season, but we'll make sure we get that here in the next couple of weeks. I'm just so excited to hear about the year that he had. We're really blessed to be partnered with those guys and appreciate their support. I got a question to ask you, and everybody that's listening to this, his ears are going to perk up. But I think, and since you all agree this time, we'll actually call him by name. I'm just absolutely shocked with a recent video that some of our listeners sent us that you and Jeff Sturgis actually agree on something. He posted a video about invasives this week and attacking some of these tree huggers that we've had problems with. I'm assuming he's having the same thing, but there's hope for all the world when Don Higgins and Jeff Sturgis are agreeing on something and both saying the same content on their platforms.
Yeah. Wow. I'm almost speechless. Yeah, I had people send me that, and I think the title of his was a little bit misleading, but once you listen to it, there was nothing in there that I disagreed with. He actually made some really good points, and I know he's never going to give me credit for anything, but I can.
We both listened to the video. He was spot on. He talked about invasives, and I think in his part of the country there is a lot of invasives, especially multiflora rose, and he spends a lot of time talking about that. I think that was the majority of his video, was talking about using some of that stuff you can't control to your advantage. But he talked about miscanthus. He talked about the people that are bashing non-native plants, getting them confused with invasive. So I just wanted to pick on you a little bit. It's kind of a funny thing over the years, and yeah, I thought he was spot on. We're going to give people credit when they need to have credit given, no matter who they are.
I will say that while Steve Shields and I were together the last few days, we filmed a video on the same topic, and I think we hit on some things that weren't in the other video. But again, I don't disagree with anything that was said on that video. It was some good information. We kind of build on it a little bit, and I'll tell you what, anybody that thinks that they can follow the all native plan for habitat management, you don't know what you're up against. And the video that Steve and I just produced is going to be a real eye opener. You're going to be shocked at what plants are not native to this country that are so prevalent in our ecosystems.
Yeah.
As well as wildlife.
Yep. I'm pretty sure my golden doodle isn't native the way he acts. He gets a little weird sometimes.
Well, I'm telling you, I'm going to reveal a bunch of plants that come from China and Asia. You know, we talk about nothing good comes from China. I'm gonna turn the tables a little bit there, Terry. I'm giving people a heads up that there's some things we get from China, and I'll throw one of them out: soybeans. Soybeans are from China.
Yep. Can't wait to hear that. Well, let's focus back on some tips, and you can reference some things that you've seen on your recent consulting visits as you've walked around. I'll tee up one of mine for a plan that I was really excited about. I had to ask you some questions as it related to some invasives that were on the river bottom, and we talked about that. You reviewed my plan before, obviously, it went out. And when I'm walking around a property, I get really excited when I see areas that already have a lot of traffic and some deer beds, and it's still a little open, and know that we can make that so much thicker. That tells me that the deer are already there, but for a reason, whether it's a south facing or there's not any pressure or there's a shelf or saddle that feeds into it, food source next to it. But when I see a property that I see some traffic, some bedding, big rubs, and see that it's still a little open or we could make it thicker than what it is, I get really excited about that in a scouting mode to say, what is this going to be next year after we go in and do some TSI work? What are some other things that you get excited about that you've seen this week?
Well, when I walk upon a situation that I know can be accessed flawlessly, and a good example was today, we came upon two locations, and I know I shocked my client when I pointed these out. But I found him two stand locations. One of them is probably about less than 10 yards off a road. Literally. I mean, if a deer was standing in the middle of the road and he was in his stand, that deer would be 10 yards from his tree. And the other one was maybe 20 yards from the edge of the road. And what makes these two stands so good was the access is so flawless. He can come in right off of that road, and he's putting absolutely zero disturbance on, and the deer traffic is right there, and the cover was thick enough. It's not like he's standing out on a telephone pole, you know, along the edge of the road. He's going to be hid so good, people driving down the road are not going to see him. But he's so close that flawless entry to that stand, and anytime you can find good stand locations that have just a foolproof access, that gets me excited. You know, guys get hung up on the trail cameras, and I use them as much as anybody, and you know, for inventory anyway. But I think too many guys are trying to use those trail cameras to pinpoint a stand location. Well, you ought to be able to find a stand location just with your two eyes. Terrain features that funnel down that deer movement, and then you combine that terrain feature with wind direction and access, and when those three things all come together, you got a great stand location. You don't need a trail camera to tell you that's a good location. The trail camera just tells you what kind of bucks are on the property. But when I come upon a good stand site with foolproof access, that's when I get excited.
All right, so I'm gonna dive into that a little bit more, both for private and public. So when you're going around and you know it's a good area, you know there's good deer on it, you know it has potential, is the first thing you're looking at is that stand with beautiful access, and then how do I change the habitat around that stand site to make it better or funnel deer? Or are you looking for the areas to funnel deer first and then trying to find the best stand site for it?
Well, I'm trying to take advantage of the deer habitat or the deer habits that are already taking place, and I'm trying to enhance those. And a good example is one of those stands I just mentioned along the road. There's a fence along that road, but there's an open gate on that fence where this stand location is at, and just across the road is big ag field. So those deer are coming out of this cover to cross the road into these ag fields in the evening, and there's an open gate right there where they want to do it anyway. So by opening that gate, but there's just a little bit of an opening right where this is at that we're going to enhance with about 5 or 6 fruit trees, pear trees or apple trees or something. We're going to give them deer another reason to cross that road right there, leave that thicket right there. And those fruit trees will hold those deer up. You know, a mature buck, he's not going to go out there and cross that road before dark, but we're going to give him a reason to come right to the edge of that road. So we're going to have this handful of fruit trees, and then we're going to have a rope scrape right there as well. And they're right on the edge of really thick cover. So that buck can come out of that thick cover. We're going to enhance it with a rope scrape first. That's going to be the first thing he hits as he comes out of that thick cover. Then he's going to hit a small group of fruit trees, and then he's going to hit the open gate and cross the road. So, you know, first I'm looking for the good stand location, and then I'm thinking what can be done to enhance that stand location. And I'm telling you, this spot, this client is probably going to kill a giant here.
Well, I think, and the reason I teed you up for that dialogue is because I think it's 180 degrees different than what most people do when they're scouting. They go and they look for deer sign, and then they decide what they think is the best way to hunt it. And most of the time where they find sign probably does not have foolproof access to it. And I think what we do with our clients, and I mean, you've seen my plans that I've done in the last week. We just take a little bit different approach. We have to evaluate every property individually and take what the property gives us. And that's going to be different every place. And some people don't like to hear that you're only going to have the ability to hunt this property with 1 or 2 wind directions. Some properties we can get creative and find 4 to 6. But most people in my gut that are listening to this podcast right now, as they're walking out their farms or they're putting their ideas together for next year, they're looking for deer sign and trying to figure out how to hunt it versus finding the places that they can hunt with 0 intrusion and the best access, and how they can change the terrain, the habitat, or the ideas around it in order to bring deer closer, longer, earlier in the day.
Yep. And sometimes all it takes is a chainsaw. Go in there and drop a tree and push them deer just a little bit closer to the ideal tree. Instead of you going in deeper, go in there now with a chainsaw, cut a tree, and push those deer closer to you instead of you moving closer to what they're already doing.
Yep. All right. So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about public land. We get a lot of questions about public, and I'm the first to tell people I don't do it. I don't have public close to me that I'm interested in hunting, and don't spend any time investing into it. But you do. If you're going to go scout a public land ground this year, shed hunting or looking for places to potentially hunt next year, what's the priority we're looking for as we're looking on public land?
Well, I want to get away from the people, and I'll just be honest. After my experience this year with the biggest turd of a human being I've ever run into in the deer woods, my desire to hunt public land has went down the tubes. I don't need to deal with that kind of garbage. I still would like to kill a public buck, but it's become way less important to me than it was a few months ago. So I want to get away from people.
Buyafarm.com is your source for farm, recreational properties, rural homes, and more. Now, here is Don Higgins with this week's featured property.
Well, welcome to this week's Buy a Farm segment. I have Don Bailey back on the show tonight to talk about an auction coming up in February in Effingham County. Don, thanks for coming on the show. Let's hear about this property.
Yeah, thank you, Terry. It's 154 acres. Been in the same family for many, many, many years. I think it's at 60 or 70. It's 154 acres. We're going to offer it in 4 tracts, a 34-acre tract and then 3 40-acre tracts, or a multi-par. Pictures on the website show it in detail. I'm going to add some aerial photos and some land pictures when the weather allows it.
Yeah, it hasn't been too friendly for picture taking from the sky, has it?
No, it's been pretty nasty.
Yep. So 154 acres, and it'll be all in one or multiple tracts. The smallest one being 34 acres, and then 3 different tracts being 40. So talk a little bit about how this is going to work.
Yes, we're going to be a multi-par. If they do sell in separate tracts, we are going to survey and clear a 50-foot easement east to west across the top of each track. So it'll be a 50-foot easement cleared. The maintenance and the road building will be up to the buyers, but we will have legal access, per se, all the way from the east to the west. If it sells in separate tracts, if it sells all together, of course, that's not going to be needed.
Sure. So for the people listening on the podcast audio platforms, just envision a big rectangle block, and the nice part about, I'm looking at the aerial right now, is each track has some tillable on it, each track has some woods on it, but the road frontage is on the east side or the right side of the picture. So what you're saying is if the tracks get divided up with different landowners, across the north side, there'll be an easement to allow the people to get access from the road to the tracks to the left of the picture or the west. Is that right?
Yes, and that'll be legal and documented and surveyed in.
Okay.
If need be.
Let's talk a little bit about the land itself. You told me that each property has at least some tillable on it, some a little bit more, some a little bit less. We'll talk a little bit about other stuff. Is there timber value on this? What's there?
Yes, there's some big timber, older timber, big timber. I plan to possibly get a timber evaluation, but I don't know if the time frame will allow me to. I just simply refuse to put a value on it in my mind because I look at one woods and I'm just not a timber person, so sure. I stay away from that. But if someone is interested in it, they definitely need to come and look at it.
Right.
And get their own opinion. It has some oil wells on it. The seller is conveying everything he's got as far as royalty, but he doesn't believe he has anything. You're buying the surface rights and then, of course, any new production. Mm-hmm. But there's all these roads throughout it to where they go and check their wells. And it's interesting, Terry. I found that while there's going to be vehicles traveling that, but I found that that's almost an advantage. You've got a good place to walk, and the deer and wildlife, turkey, if they're standing in the middle of the road and they see a vehicle, they almost stop and you have to honk your horn at them. They're real familiar with traffic.
Sure. And it's not like people are in there every day as far as an intrusion thing. This is only a maintenance thing where they're in there, so very little traffic when it does happen. But you're right, there's already almost a road system established there, so you're not taking just a fresh cut of block timber and trying to navigate it for the first time. So yeah, and this could be anything from a home site to just a recreational property or a hunt club or anything coming in, depending on how you would buy the different tracks. So let's talk a little bit about the time frame. When does the bidding open and close on this one, and is there any ways that people can see the property in person that are scheduled?
The bidding opens Thursday. The bidding opens the 2nd of February and closes February the 16th.
At 8 p.m. Central, I believe, right?
Yeah, quits at 8 p.m. Central.
All right, so bidding opens February 2nd, closes the 16th of February at 8 p.m. Now, if somebody wants to look at it, is it by appointment only, or is there an open house or anything for it?
Probably won't have an open house, but it's available at any time to call me, whatever works for you. I don't live that far from it.
Mm-hmm.
So anybody wants to look at it, we can accommodate almost anything, Terry.
Gotcha. So Effingham County, Illinois, so right outside, I guess south of Mason would be the best kind of reference on a map. But
Yep.
February 2nd to February 16th, Biofarm has several different auctions closing in February. So make sure you're watching the biofarm.com website or contacting one of the agents to learn more about each of these properties. I like the looks of this because there's timber, there's tillable, there's road systems. Could really make a nice property for someone no matter what their objectives were. It's kind of got a little bit of everything.
Yes, and Terry, it's really important that if anybody's got any questions or ideas, I sure want them to contact us.
All right.
To contact me, it's 618-919-1031. You can call or text or email me at dbailey@biofarm.com.
All right. Well, Don, thanks for being on the show. Thanks for talking about this property in Effingham County. Please go out and follow biofarm.com on their website and social media platforms. We look forward to having you next week, sir.
Thank you, Terry, and have a good evening.
You too.
All right, Don, here's our first question of the week. You should be able to see it now.
Okay, the first one comes from Dave Walls from Martinsville, Indiana. It says, Don and Terry, thanks for a great podcast. I currently have 2 set-aside fields that were in a state-sponsored program. One is 5 acres and one is 3 acres. Currently, the deer use these as bedding at certain times of the year, but in the wintertime, they are too thin. I am wanting to put switchgrass in both these fields, and I was wondering if I should do half of each field one year and do the other half the following year. My thinking is that some cover is better than all of it being gone at the same time. So my question is phasing habitat improvements a good idea? Thank you, and God bless. Well, Dave, you basically said at the opening of your submission that those fields are not offering much this time of the year anyway. If it was me, I'd just go ahead and get it done and get it out of the way. And to be honest, the first year switchgrass, depending on the weather we get the first summer, that first growing season, that first year switchgrass might give you more cover than what you have now with what's already there. So if you've got the time and you know what projects you're going to do, I'm a fan of just getting them done. The sooner they're done, the better you can start reaping the rewards, and the sooner the deer can start utilizing them.
I'm going to back up just for a second because I know so many of our listeners are in areas that don't have these programs. Explain what a state-sponsored program is for everybody, because people might not understand that.
Well, I'm guessing that he's talking about CRP, and that's really not a state. That's a federal program. He might be in a state that Indiana is where he's from. I don't know if Indiana has any state programs or not. Maybe they do. I know some DNRs, Department of Natural Resource agencies, they do offer various seedlings for projects, but maybe that's what he's talking about.
But this is some type of government coming in and saying we're subsidizing or giving you money to do XYZ on the property in return for most of the time habitat. I know here in Kentucky, there's been some money given to farmers to promote rotational grazing recently. So there's all different types of things. So state program, federal program is usually either the government giving you product to plant or paying you to plant in return for creating wildlife habitat. So, all right. Second question.
This one comes from Matt Mickelson from Osseo, Ohio. It says, hello, Don and Terry. I've been listening to your podcast for just over a year now, and I've gained a lot of knowledge from you two. I've only been hunting for about 3 years now, and this fall was my first attempt to put in a food plot, and I've had success with your deadly dozen. My question is for my future food plots, is I really don't want to use glyphosate. I was curious to see if there was any connection between the use of glyphosate and CWD. I've found countless research online of the connection between the two. Should we be using this on our personal plots, or will this have any effect, if any, on the local deer herd, since the entire ag business is using it? Thank you again for all the knowledge and keeping the Lord our God the top priority. Well, Matt, I am totally unaware of any research involving glyphosate and CWD. Personally, I have my doubts that there's a connection, and the reason for it was CWD was first discovered in a research facility in Fort Collins, Colorado, a government facility in mule deer. I don't believe they would be using any glyphosate in that facility in those mule deer pens. So I kind of, I'm as big of a conspiracy theorist as anyone when it comes to the government, but when it comes to glyphosate and the CWD connection, I really don't see it. CWD is it's a brain condition where a prion is a misfolded protein, and that causes the deer's brain to basically get eaten away. I'd compare it almost to Alzheimer's in people, and I just don't see how glyphosate is going to cause that misfolded protein. And I could be wrong, but I've never looked online to see the research you're talking about. So maybe if someone has more information on that than I do, if they have a research paper or something, maybe send it to me. I'd definitely be interested in seeing it. But I just, without seeing that, I just have my doubts if there's a connection there.
Yeah, maybe if somebody's seen something like that or knows where it's at on YouTube, just comment down below and leave the link there and everybody can kind of see it. I know this isn't the question Matt asked, but it's kind of important to me to remind everybody because I've been an idiot and done it myself. Food plotters have a really bad habit of not understanding the concern of dealing with herbicides and chemicals. And I've been guilty of walking through standing beans with a backpack sprayer and having the mist all over my face and legs and arms and everything. I just want to, I want to caution everybody the amount of people that are suffering with different types of cancer, lymphoma, that they really do believe that that's tied back to some of these ag chemicals. Whether it is or it isn't, we have to take every precaution possible to not be breathing this stuff or getting contact. Wear gloves. Make sure that you're spraying in a direction, especially with an open cab or backpack sprayer, that this stuff is not on you. You're not walking through it. Please, everybody, it's not worth keeping weeds out of your food plot is not worth potentially getting sick later on down the road. And I know most people are going to say it takes extensive amounts of contact for anything to happen. I don't care. This stuff is nasty stuff. Make sure you're keeping it away from you.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's no doubt some of those chemicals are definitely a health risk. If I know there's a lot of people that don't like glyphosate or Roundup, and I think it's probably because it's one of the more commonly used. It's an over-the-counter. You don't need any license. You can go buy it at Walmart even. So I think that's why it has caused such a concern. But my point is that if you're afraid of glyphosate or Roundup, you really can get around using it. It doesn't matter if you're planting corn or soybeans. I've planted both and never had to use glyphosate because I used a good residual herbicide, and that residual will prevent the weeds, so you don't have to spray later.
Yeah. But I think all chemicals in general, just use extra precaution. Make sure you're protecting yourself, and if you get it on you, make sure we get it off quick as possible. If it's okay, Don, let's take a quick break and give a Lester's feed update. We haven't done that in a couple weeks. The first part of this is just an announcement. Our accounting staff and volunteer staff is working frantically to get everyone's charitable contribution statements from 2022 out. Since we are full IRS nonprofit as a 501(c), you receive a charitable donation if you made it where we have address to return it. Now, obviously, people who send us cash or undocumented donations, we don't have a way to do that. But for those of you who are asking about your charitable contribution, we're working frantically to get it. I hope you understand. We are volunteers. Nobody's getting paid for this. But we're working on that to hopefully get that out here in January so everybody can do their taxes. The second thing is, I don't want to mention the name of the family, but we helped a family out this last week that it's just a super sad story. So just keep them in your prayers. It's a family from out in California. They contacted us first last August, early September, and single mother, 16-year-old daughter that had cancer, bone cancer on her face. And the motor in her vehicle had blown up, and they were having trouble getting her back and forth to the hospital for treatments and all that. Well, in early October, the young girl lost her life. And we've kept in contact with the mother. We've figured out some arrangements to help her get her transportation back, since obviously she hadn't worked in a long time. And, your heart just breaks for these families because, we spend a lot of time talking about how we help people. And it's a feel good. We maybe write a check or write a donation, get a free hat, and then we move on and we go back to our normal life. But we have to remember, if you spend time in prayer or go to church or whatever you're doing where you're talking to the Lord, lift up these families. Dealing with this kind of heartache and tragedy takes a toll on families, relationships, marriages, and that's even when the child comes out of it. I can't imagine the stress of when you lose a child. So not only for this specific family, but all of them, keep them in your prayers. One of the things that I'm really led to do with Lester's Feet as we continue to move on is, after seeing the divorce rate that happens between mom and dad while a child goes through a traumatic experience, seeing how high the divorce rate is in those families, I don't know how we're going to do this yet, but just trying to encourage or provide resources for families to navigate that also. Hopefully this foundation's big enough one day that we can really minister to people with that kind of stuff. But tough situation, so just keep them in your prayers, and thank you in advance for your patience while we're getting your charitable contribution statements sent out. So we'll move on to question number 3.
This one comes from Jonathan Miller from West Farmington, Ohio. He says, "Hi, Don and Terry. Keep up the great work with the podcast and Lester's Feet. I am a longtime listener of the podcast and have learned much. Do you think that all human scent smells the same? If it doesn't, do you think a buck can identify if he smells the same person twice? Good luck the rest of the season. P.S. Did you get my king buck pick?" Well, Jonathan, I get so many picks of king buck that I don't know how many king bucks that we have running the countryside. So I probably did get yours. I just don't remember it. In regards to your question, I do believe that a buck can tell an individual person's odor. And I've used this analogy or this example in the past. I believe the deer on my property know my smell over other people's smells. And the reason I say that, when I sit in my tree stand and I get winded, which doesn't happen very often, but occasionally, if it happens, the deer react totally different than if I've got a cameraman with me. And I'm sure it's because they have learned of Don of going around the farm, taking care of his cows, taking care of his food plots, mowing, doing this and that. I'm convinced they know my smell over another person's. And the other thing, I was trying to think of an analogy to, make my point, to answer your question. And humans recognize by sight. So, a farmer, he may have, say a dozen beef cows, and they can all be Black Angus beef cows, but he can go out there and without having ear tags in those cows, he has come to recognize each of his individual cows. He can tell this cow from that cow visually, even though they all look the same to the casual passerby. A buck, well, all deer really, they use their nose to tell each other apart. A doe knows her fawns from other fawns by the smell of her fawns. They have just their smell is that much better than ours that they use their nose to the same degree that we use our eyes. And that's how they tell each other apart. And I'm sure if they can tell each other apart, they can tell that Terry stinks a whole lot worse than I do when he's hunting on my farm.
It wasn't because I ate deer poop, I can tell you that.
That was the code brown that you left behind the blind.
Well, it makes sense because, looking at rope scrapes, that's why they're so effective. That's the bulletin board that all of them leave their scent on as I'm here. Yeah, I think it makes perfect sense. And I don't know if a dog uses the scent as much as a deer does, but a dog's the same way. If I walk into your house and Robin's little dog comes over, the first thing he's doing is smelling me, or you put your hand out and let him smell you. My dog, if I come in after dark, he's outside, he'll come running over barking, doesn't know who he is until that nose sticks out and he recognizes that smell and knows it's me when he can't see anything. So I think it makes perfect sense. I'm a big fan, spinning this out a little bit differently. I'm a big fan of consistency when you are working on your property. So trail cameras, feeders, mineral sites, maintenance of any kind when you're on your property, if you do it the same way, the same time, those deer are associating you with something positive, and that smell is going to be something positive. And like you said, you bring in a cameraman, there's something different there. We don't recognize that. So, and it's, when you say that those deer wind you, I don't know that you're saying that they don't smell you. It's just they don't freak out and flip out and blow and run across the field like they do if myself or Steve Shields was with you that day.
Right, exactly.
So it makes sense to me.
Hey, Spinks from Quiet Cat here in our virtual showroom space where you can connect with a product expert and learn all about our bikes, our accessories, and what makes Quiet Cat the leader in off-road electric bikes. Schedule a live session today by clicking in the link below or going to quietcat.com/meet.
The next one comes from Zach Anderson from Bay City, Wisconsin. He says, Dear Don and Terry, as it goes for winter food between corn and soybeans, do you think one would last longer than the other? Let's say they had same browse pressure and same size plot. Just curious if you get a longer stand of food going with one versus the other. Thanks. Zach, that's very interesting because I've just in the past month or so come to realize, and I knew that deer like that NutriCrave corn, but they like that NutriCrave corn better than they do soybeans. And I never thought I would say that, but that corn is the ticket. And I seen a plot today on the farm I was on in Iowa that the corn had just been wiped out. They'd have a hard time finding a kernel there. My current corn plot is totally wiped out right now. I mean, you'd have a hard time finding an ear, maybe even a kernel out there. And yet last year, that same plot, I do a rotation. Last year, that same plot was in soybeans. And at the end of winter, we're a long way from the end of winter right now, but at the end of winter, I still had soybeans left, and with roughly the same number of deer on my property. And even though that corn yields more bushels per acre than the soybeans, they're going to wipe that corn out first, depending on the variety of corn, of course. So if you've got small plots to work with, they say don't plant soybeans in small plots, but I'm telling you, corn takes it up even another level. You need to just forget corn in small plots. I mean, literally, if you don't have 2 or 3 acres at minimum, and in some cases 10, 15 acres, forget it.
It all depends on your deer density and what other foods around you, obviously. I mean, in some cases, our friends up at Larson Farms, I've talked about their YouTube channel before. Eric Weber, also known as the Big Swede, did some testing for NutriCrave corn and a test corn for us up in Minnesota. And that high oil corn shot up and the deer browsed the stalks off before, in high deer numbers. So every situation's a little bit different with deer density and what is around you. But the people that live in the microplot world need to get into a blend of product that has a lot of diversity in it so that it takes the browse pressure off one specific product. So like your clovers, your deadly dozens, all of the products in that blend is not palatable at the same time. So small plots, you have to put more diversity. If that makes sense to everybody listening, you just can't get away with having a single product in a small food plot, because there's going to be a time when it comes that's the sweet spot of the dessert bar at the Ponderosa, if you know what I mean, and every deer's going to hit it and mow it off.
Mm-hmm.
So bigger plots, I want corn and beans every single year. I want
Absolutely.
both of them, not one or the other, every one of them. So all the people that always talk about rotations, figure out a way to get your rotations where you have both of them every year. That's always been part of my plan anyway.
Yep. Okay, the next one's from Brandon Cox from New Haven, Kentucky. It says, Dear Don and Terry, first off, let me start by saying thank you for such a great podcast. I look forward to each week. You both are fine men. In a neighborhood that consists of thousands of acres of primarily junk, high-grade, big timber, and multiple neighbors who all bait, what are the top 3 ways I can set my 200 acres apart for daylight movement? Side note, the terrain is hill country with 200 to 300 foot elevation changes, offering little area on the tops of narrow ridges for food plot construction. Look forward to hearing your opinions. Keep up the good work, and I hope 2023 is blessed for you both. So Brandon wants tips on how to set his property apart when it's so similar to the neighbors, or at least it appears similar. Number 1, freedom of human intrusion. Those deer know where people have been. Keep yours free of human intrusion and you'll have more deer. Number 2, food sources. Offer something that your neighbors don't. They may have corn feeders. Guess what? You put NutriCrave corn in yours, and I promise you the deer are going to prefer yours. The terrain may not be suitable for putting in food plots, but you can put in fruit trees here and there. If you cut some openings and, just get some sunlight in where those fruit trees can produce. So that's another way to set your property apart. Number 3, I would say is always hunt with the wind, using the wind. I found that most deer hunters have no idea how to play the wind. I see so many tree stands in the woods in my travels that I think to myself, how in the world was that person ever playing the wind? And I'm not even talking about access. A lot of them have terrible access as well. There's just no way to access where the stand's at. But then you start thinking about the wind, and there's just no way that you could hunt that, because no matter which way the wind is blowing, there could definitely be deer downwind, and it's very likely to be. So that would be my 3: freedom of human intrusion, provide food sources that your neighbors don't have, and always hunt the wind. You got 3, Terry?
Yeah, I would just add on to that, and this is probably where I get a little bit too detailed in some of my consulting plans, but I changed the bedding on your property. even if I go in and I cut those hillsides that they're using extra hard. 200 acres is a lot of ground in Kentucky, so I know that I live in areas that have 200 to 300 foot elevation changes. So I just know that there's always going to be fingers, hillsides that the deer prefer to be on, and I find those and I go in and cut them hard and create the nastiest, wooliest mess that you could ever dream of, like a bomb went off, where I can hunt the downwind sides of it with certain winds. And even if your neighbors are feeding or they have food plots, use that to your advantage. Hunt them before they get to those spots. It's a big part of what my plans include. I might get a little bit too over detailed sometimes, but I think it's just topography is really interesting to me, because it presents a lot of ways to access different areas on the farm creatively if you understand what the wind's doing and can do some work with a chainsaw. We go out and hunt in Illinois, and it's flat ground. You can walk out across open ag. We don't have that benefit down here. So I would add a fourth one to it, and that's enhanced bedding in strategic areas in that 200 acres. And get them to where they might be on your neighbors at dark, but you're going to be holding them during daylight, and get them when they stand up.
I got to agree with that one.
Okay. I'm not an idiot all the time, I guess.
Nobody called you an idiot. You're the brains of the operation.
No, I don't know about that. So, okay. Well, what do you got planned for this week?
Well, I'm going to be home for about 3 days, and I'd like to get at least a couple of hunts in, afternoon hunts, maybe shoot a cull buck or a doe. Then back on the road, we're going to be consulting in your home state of Kentucky towards the end of the week, and I got one in southern Indiana towards the end of the week. So I'll be in the deer woods every day, put it that way. I'm either going to be hunting or consulting. How about you?
I leave for Pittsburgh on Monday, and I'll be in Pittsburgh all through. I think I come home late Wednesday night. Thursday, I'm going to run up to the ATA show. Like I said, I had a couple short meetings that I have to attend, and then going to be I love the Monk family so much. They're the owners of Wise Eye. They're just really good Christian friends of ours. And anytime they're within 2 hours of home, I'm going to go hang out with them for a little bit. So good opportunity for me to catch up with Harold and Megan and the rest of the group. So I'll be visiting with them quite a bit. I got to be back in the office on Friday for a meeting, and then I'm not sure. I might be coming to Illinois Saturday to pull stands, but I'm not sure yet. Have to see what's going on and whether I'm doing a consulting visit in Ohio or not. One or the other. I'll be running up to Illinois to pull some stands. I got a little bit of chainsaw work I want to do, but I don't necessarily want to wait till March when we're doing the master class to do it. So I'll either be on a consulting visit Saturday or be in Illinois pulling some tree stands and picking up my new Quiet Cat bike. They shipped mine to your house for some reason, and I haven't gotten my new bike yet, so I need to get it picked up.
I won't be here, but you know where it's at. Help yourself. You need a bed to stay in. There's one there too.
Yep. And one quick teaser for next week's show. Don doesn't know this yet, but I bought Don this really odd Christmas present this year, just because I know he's a prepper at heart and he needs to be prepared for any situation. You don't have it with you there, do you? Oh, there you go. So legally this is considered a hammer, but it's a survivalist axe. And next week I'm going to tell you a story about this thing and the company that I met. And it's only going to take about 5 minutes to share the story, but out of dumb luck on Christmas Eve, made contact with one of the owners of this company and learned about their small business and how they also use their platform to help with a nonprofit that helps veterans. And so excited to share that story from a local business in Illinois. No affiliation at all, just good people that I love the story and love what they're doing. So I'm going to share that with everybody on next week's podcast.
Can't wait to hear it.
All right. Well, for everybody, thanks for your attention. Thanks for listening. Please recommend us to your friends. If you like the show, leave a comment down below. The more you guys comment and like every one of these episodes or leave us a rating on the platform you're doing, helps the analytics to recommend it to people who enjoy the same type of thing. So we appreciate the support, kindness, and always just covet everybody's support. It means more than you guys know.
Absolutely. Thanks, everybody. God bless. Have a great week.
Chasing Giants has been brought to you by Osseo Camo, Via Farm Real Estate Company, 360 Hunting Blinds, Victory Chevrolet, Real World Wildlife Products, Matthews Archery, Novix Tree Stands, Gingerich Tree Farm, WildlifeFarming.com, Quiet Cat, and Vortex Optics. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode of Chasing Giants.